Okay. So our first speaker tonight then is Tysoe. Chuck, this is his second meeting and already he's volunteered to do his icebreaker speech. This is speech number 1, and as I said, it's called the icebreaker speech. The time, Mr. Timer, is 4 to 6 minutes, lights at 4, 5, and 6 minutes. The project objectives are to begin speaking in front of the audience, and for the evaluator to provide information to the speaker about strengths that he already has, and to provide several opportunities for improvement. The speech title is Gone in 60 Seconds. Please welcome Chuck Tysoe.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster and Toastmaster colleagues. I hope it will become evident why I've chosen this topic. It's gone in 60 seconds. Well, it's the description I have chosen for my introduction to myself. 6 years ago, I attended the 30th reunion of my high school graduating class. The shock and the enjoyment I experienced at that time seemed to me a suitable starting point to consider life, its value, its hazards, its lessons, its necessities, as it has seemed to me, at least up until this very day. Here's a question I find useful. Will you or I be breathing in 60 seconds as we consider our life and what we know and what we don't know? I do not know the answer, and mayhap the answer may well shorten my discourse. If so, please excuse in advance any inconvenience. Meanwhile, my account begins with the discovery that of some 60 University of Toronto Schools graduates from 1975, at least 5 had died well before 2005. 2 of them, both football teammates in their 20s. One of these from a heart attack. In Monty Python's Holy Grail, the knights, in order to cross the gorge of eternal peril, must answer these questions 3, ere the other side he see. What is your name? What is your quest? And a third, more random, as what is your favorite color? That usually fatally tripped up the pilgrim. The first 2 questions have, for me, posed the worst threat. In any case, I confess that at this juncture of life, 2 tasks preoccupy me. That is, 1, to be reconciled with the self of my memory, and 2, to convert the lessons of experience into a quest to create lasting value from what remains. Recently, I found myself needing to write an obituary for my father. I've lost both parents within a span of 3.5 years. Recently, or some time ago, I allowed myself to conclude that I am descended from 2 master races, quotations. The Germans, who were encouraged to think so by their Nazi overlords, and the British, who need no such prompting. More to the point, my beginnings were against long odds. My mother's family were Eastern Front refugees from the Soviet Army as World War II drew to a terrible close. My father was a pilot trainee and was just too young to be conscripted to the most dangerous of aircrew assignments. But these are trivial matters against the opinion of their respective families concerning the liaison. They met at a dance when my mother was training as a nurse in post-war London, England. We, that is myself and my sisters Carol and Margaret, grew up in the Greater London area, Dad working in the aircraft industry. My earliest conscious memory is of waiting age 2.5 in a daycare as my younger sister Margaret was born. And then, later, of our older sister Carol calmly pulling the toddler Margaret out of a pond on the property as she cheerfully rolled underwater. She did this not once, but twice, and saved her from drowning. Then there was the frightening backfire of my dad's motorcycle in the morning, and he dashing in and out of the kitchen in a fury, carrying pots of water to put out the fire. And Carol, my older sister, pulling the bike on top of her while playing under the kickstand, and emerging with a smile and a smudged face and dress. I still vividly remember at age perhaps 5 or 6, losing control of my bike on a steep hill and the resultant crash. And then my first real experience at that time of the kindness of strangers, gentle voices, careful hands, a ride home, the smell of car leather. Beginning school in Essex, I had trouble reading. Mr. Fugel, whom I also remember as a quiet, gentle soul, thought I might be retarded, as it was then called. It was he, however, who suggested an eye test. The resulting glasses were physically and socially painful, but from then on no book was closed to me, while Mom and Dad proved a ready combination of thesaurus and dictionary. In 1966, our family moved in the so-called brain drain from socialist Britain to a more promising Canada. Unknown to my parents, it was for me a reprieve from slavery of sorts. My chum, John Hodder, had introduced me to shoplifting, and then used the threat of disclosure to bind me in crime. I lived in constant fear of his coming by. I remember my overall sensation on the airplane, just nothing but relief, while my mother complained that I wasn't enjoying the view. I suffered greatly from physical and verbal abuse during those early school years. Consolation came in a series of sympathetic teachers who chose to ignore my atrocious penmanship and reliable C's and D's, and to provide me with great opportunity and encouragement. That is, until Mrs. Thorpe, my grade 8 homeroom teacher, who rewarded me with the cruel score of 50, the class low in public speaking. During my high school years, the black dogs of depression began to stalk me. With the passage of time, it becomes more of a fathomless mystery to me how I was able to complete the course and go on to university. I can find no other reason than the grace of God. I'm glad that I have not reaped the rewards of my youthful destructive behavior. My wife and I have 3 grown sons, 1 married, all cause enough to rejoice at the way things have fallen for us. And I've been able to meet, learn from, and sometimes write about amazing men. One of them, Hartley Coles, a great newspaper man and a great Canadian who happened to live here in Acton. Why me? Why here? Why now? Why was little Timmy Madden, and not me, killed by a car after a Cub meeting? Why did a schoolmate choke and die in his sleep at a party, and I wake up and survive? Why was Willie Morris, my rugby teammate and later a police officer, killed by a truck while biking, and yet I survived my recklessness? Much of my life has been a quest to answer to these and other questions. I have found answers to them in what I've come to consider the best book in the world, the Bible, about which I need not detain you further at this time, but I'm always glad to converse about the faith of which the great book speaks, for that is the great quest which rules my life, and with it, the secret to writing the perfect sentence. So now with thanks, I will close this account, and hope that you have found it in some respects profitable. Thank you so much.
We're starting with the speech evaluators. And Tim, do you want to go first?
Sure.
And you're evaluating Chuck.
Right.
Thank you, Janet. You didn't write Brad, did you? Some people did. So, thank you, Mountain GE, fellow Toastmasters, and most especially Chuck. My role in evaluating an icebreaker. I've evaluated lots of people, and the icebreaker evaluations either scare me to death or are very easy. And I've never decided why. Maybe it's because what I'm supposed to do is provide you with some constructive input without being too critical over what we saw. So I want to talk about what I saw and what I felt, and maybe give you a couple little tidbits for improvement. I didn't meet you last week. I'm not sure your background, but we heard a lot of information in that speech. I'm taking from what I heard and what I heard near the end that you're either a writer or you're into writing in some shape or form. I'll get into it later, but because that's going to be both a tremendous asset in what I saw, but also a big challenge, I think. So little things that I saw that you can build on. Your facial expression was great. You have a little smile going. You'll be able to build on that over time, I think, in terms of engaging the audience. Your voice is fantastic. It fills this room. I think it could fill any room. And I heard a bit of variety in there as you started to get more forceful in terms of wanting to make your point. You're very comfortable up here. I didn't see any issue with nerves really impacting how you were presenting. And you told lots and lots and lots of interesting stories. And that's where I get into the whole writer versus speaker thing. So to begin with, when you first walked up here, the first little piece of advice I'll give you is you don't need to start before you get here. You can get up here, take your time, and get settled, and then start. What I noticed you did was you said, thanks to Bill, you turned around and you got right into it before actually you faced the audience totally. So I recommend you get up here, face everybody, take a breath, and then start. As a writer, what I got in there was lots and lots of very complex, very colorful language, which I think was phenomenal as far as listening, but it's a very difficult thing to convey from a speech perspective because you end up relying on a well-crafted speech that was written down ahead of you. So nothing wrong with notes, but I think you ended up relying on them a fair bit because you wanted to get it right. You had complex sentences in there, a lot of complex phrasing, a lot of complex ideas to get across. So your challenge is going to be, how do you simplify that in a way that allows you to speak more comfortably? And I think Janet writes a little bit, or Judy writes a little bit, so I guess you're probably finding some of the same issues is what works well written down and to read does not necessarily translate perfectly into how you're going to convey yourself. So I think you've got a tremendous foundation. Your use of words is great. The way in which you construct sentences is great. Now, and you'll get opportunities, and I think it's project 3 or 4 where it's using words and so on, is how do you simplify the language, not dumb it down, but how do you simplify it to get your language across? I mentioned the notes. I don't have an issue with notes, especially in the first 2, 3, 4 speeches, until you get comfortable speaking somewhat off the cuff. Memorizing a speech is very difficult, and especially a speech that's as complex as that. So using notes is fine. I would suggest you work at simplifying the notes, i.e. instead of every word written down, get to your major points. And then and just write those down so you know where to guide you. And as far as the construction of the speech is concerned, a great narrative. And you started off really well. So you had a good opening. The body was very, very well crafted, very well written. I think the ending could use a little bit of shoring up. I think the red light came on and you saw you were over time, so you wanted to kind of finish it up. I think you'll also find that you were significantly over time like I am now. So the first learning is going to be how much time is 6 minutes. And that's, I think, one of the first most valuable lessons in Toastmasters. How much can you cram in to 5 minutes? Lots of information there. Great. I'm looking forward to number 2. Congratulations very much.